dismissed it. The Jordanians, King Abdullah, he says, well, this is unacceptable. Because let's remember the Palestinian population in Jordan is well over 70% of the overall Jordanian population. It has the largest, about 2.2 million Palestinians living in Jordan. If they were to agree to a confederal system with the Palestinians, the Hashemite, original Jordanian entity, would be diluted, and its future would be threatened. So they have dismissed this altogether. But as I said, as recent as last month, the PA ambassador, the PLO ambassador in Moscow, has indicated that they're willing to discuss it. And Mahmoud Abbas, he said, he made this remark to Peace Now, which is one of the peace organizations in Israel. They met him in February of this year, and he told Peace Now that he would be willing to consider a confederate arrangement. So the general outline of the Trump plan is a form of self-rule for the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, and it may develop into and become recognized in the American political lexicon if they behave well. Jared Kushner gave an interview to an American TV station on the 2nd of June this month. And he said that he acknowledged the Palestinians have right to a state, to self-determination, but they're not ready. They're not ready for it. It's the type of condescending, racist, colonial, attitude to people to the other. You see, and this was picked up by several commentators and officials, Palestinians. Dr. Hanan Ashrari, she tweeted, immediately after this, castigating Kushner for his racist, language and approach to the whole thing, as well as Israeli commentators in Israel itself. Daniel Seidman, for example, he tweeted on this because Kushner was saying if the Palestinians demonstrate good behavior, then perhaps they will be ready to have a state. Let me say a few words about the refugee issue, because the refugee issue is one of the most complex and enduring aspects of the conflict since 1948. As you remember, in 1948, about 800,000 Palestinians, who constituted about 3/4 of the population at the time, were expelled. That year, the United Nations adopted Resolution 194, calling for their return to their homeland. That resolution has been reaffirmed every year by the General Assembly, and it still remains unfulfilled. The Israelis are not willing to allow them to return because they want to preserve what is called the Jewish character of the State of Israel. See? However, in law, anyone who has been driven out or expelled from his home is entitled to return. It doesn't matter under what circumstances you leave your home, whether it's by war, by natural disaster, you have a right to return. And this is enshrined in several bodies of international law, human rights law, humanitarian law, the law of nations. And the fact that it was reaffirmed so many times by the General Assembly, it is regarded as what is called customary international anyhow, it is not happening. And this is why we see every week people in Gaza, they go to the borders and they demonstrate and remind the world, you see, that this remains the unfulfilled right. Since they started this great march of return 1 year ago, over 272 Palestinians were killed on the border with Israel. The reality is that these people in the Gaza Strip, some studies say about 83% are from territories from villages inside Israel. They can walk to the village from Gaza. They don't need, to be shipped, to be airlifted. They can actually walk. They can see. Some of them can see their villages, but they cannot exercise that right. And that is the injustice, the enduring injustice, or one of the most salient, you see, and painful injustices of the whole conflict, that people have been driven out of their homes. They want to exercise the right of return, but they are told to live in squalor, in camps, and be blockaded and denied, the most basic of necessities for survival. This is the reality today. So that issue, you see, it is one of the most burning and contentious of all the issues on the table, and the policies reflected by the Trump administration to date demonstrate that they have no intention or willingness to address it in accord with international resolutions. In accord with international resolutions. See? 194 calls, when we examine the resolution, there are three aspects to it. There is repatriation, there is restitution of property, because some of them can go back to Jerusalem and see the emigres and their homes, their grandfathers' homes are still there. In law, they have a right to have that property returned to them. And thirdly, compensation for the losses incurred over the 70 years of exile and dispossession. Israelis, they would like to give compensation, or they propose a compensation. And Palestinians are saying the compensation is not a substitute for repatriation. Repatriation is an essential element of Resolution 194. You see? So, this is why the refugee issue remains one of the most difficult and unresolved of all the subjects. Okay. Okay, let's turn to the possible scenarios. Let's say there are four scenarios, really. But that's three scenarios, but I'll start with one general observation about the whole thing. That the Trump deal of the century may never see the light of day, because it has been driven by the current Israeli Prime Minister, who himself is fighting for survival. And this is why it has not been announced. You see, every time we've been given a date, and then it has been postponed and delayed. And so after the April elections, in which Netanyahu failed to get enough seats in the Knesset to form a government, they have proposed new elections in October, and the Trump administration, on its part, have delayed the announcement of the deal of the century. What happens if Netanyahu fails in October? It may well be the end of the so-called deal of the century. And we're going into a period of election, campaigning in America. Next year will be the presidential election. So time may very well run out on Mr. Trump and his administration to get this deal done, to impose it, as it were, on the parties. But it may fail for other reasons, because it doesn't have the support of the Palestinian people. And some of the Arab countries are very hesitant. The key countries like Jordan and Egypt. I mean, some reports speak of investing in the Sinai Peninsula for the benefit of Gaza, you see, and that the investments in the Sinai Peninsula will be funded by the Gulf states. The Egyptians are reluctant. They don't want to be coming forward because they don't want to be saddled with a problem that is essentially Israel's problem. The problem of Gaza is an Israeli problem. They blockaded it, they created this state of poverty, you see. And so to assume responsibility for this, the Egyptians are very reluctant. And even President Mubarak, former President Mubarak, he said that the whole idea of using the Sinai, of settling Palestinians in Sinai, was proposed to him by Netanyahu, and he told Netanyahu, you better prepare for war. So this whole idea, is a non-starter as far as the Egyptians are concerned. Another scenario is perhaps the Americans would try to have a Palestinian constituency that would support it. People who are more malleable to the whole idea, not Abbas and his group, but some disaffected people. Mohammed Dahlan, for example, who lives in the UAE and is very close to all the intelligence agencies. Mohammed Dahlan was a former security minister during Arafat's time. He fell out with Abbas and now lives in exile in the UAE. He is seen as the most likely successor to Abbas when he passes. Now, the current PLO leadership and those in Ramallah, even if they reject the plan, will the Americans be able to find people like Dahlan and so on who they can bring on board to demonstrate the support or acceptance of it? This is not very likely still. At the end of the day, the project is too questionable, too dubious in the light of the public generally, and as well as among neighboring states. There's no support for it. The third scenario is that it will succeed. That is very unlikely, as we said. It all depends on the survival of Netanyahu, who, by the way, is facing 3 charges of corruption. He may very well end up in prison, before this year is out, rather than see this, deal through. Let me conclude by saying that there are certain requirements, no doubt, from a Palestinian point of view, and that is their unity. Unfortunately, the rift between the West Bank and Gaza is still a very wide rift, irreconcilable differences between the parties, and this will have to be addressed if the Palestinian people are to make any progress towards the attainment of their national rights. This is the issue of unity. But it is also important that the PA, reduce or bring to an end this, bizarre cooperation, security cooperation that they have maintained with Israel over the years, over the last 27 years, in which they have become effectively the policemen of Israel in the occupied territory. That will have to come to an end, and to activate Palestinian civil society more than it is at the present time, so that they can drive the national project forward rather than become subject to a dictatorship that operates from Ramallah. I think this is very important, that the PA in Ramallah reduces, minimizes its control, and to encourage the growth of civil institutions, organizations, trade unions, give them a free hand, enable them, empower them, rather than that cripple and stifle their aspirations. By so doing, they have clearly set back their national cause many years, and we hope that this will change. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for shedding some light on what is an incredibly complex situation. We have a short time for questions. Daud has to catch a train in Leicester tonight, so we will be finishing promptly at 1:45. If you have a question, can you please keep it brief? We have a slight technical problem with the microphones. Only one can be on it at a time. So we'll take this microphone. When you've asked the question, turn the mic off.
Could I ask you, you mentioned Mahmoud Abbas's interest in a confederation system, but to my mind increasingly, the two-state solution is dead, and the only real solution is a single secular state in the land between the Jordan and the Med. How we get from here to there is the interesting question. Do you see any possibility of that kind of a scenario coming to pass?
I agree with you, first of all, that the whole two-state solution, is over. The Americans are not speaking about. No, the Israelis are openly saying that, they will annex all of the West Bank, etc. So, the most likely scenario, as we see it, is a single state in the land west of the Jordan River, in which both people will have equal rights. Short of this, we would just have the conflict being perpetuated. Insofar as Jordan is concerned, there's nothing that indicates a willingness, to become part of a confederal system with the Palestinians on the West Bank, or with Israel per se. Mahmoud Abbas is saying he's willing to become a partner in this tripartite system: Jordan, Palestine, and Israel. The Jordanians, as we know, was an artificial state created after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Their origins are not in that part of the world. They come from the Hijaz, and they still have this historic pain that they've nurtured over the years from being expelled from Makkah. So I don't see them, conceding to become a part of a confederal system. And in that light, the most likely scenario is a single state west of the Jordan River for both peoples, Jews and Palestinians, with equal democratic rights.
Thanks. You mentioned the suggestions that have come from both the US and Netanyahu about annexation of the settlements. What are the practical consequences of that? Because they're covered already by Israeli law and all the rest of it. So what, I mean, obviously it's in the breach of international law, but what are the consequences?
Well, if you take the area C where some of the settlements are located, it's a question of resources also, you see, water in particular. And Israel is unwilling to share those resources with the Palestinian people. So that is one of the most outstanding consequences were they to annex the settlements. It's not just the settlements, it's a settlement with the resources, and water being the primary resource, a very scarce one, you know, in that land. But on another level, it would underscore the impracticality of having a single Palestinian state. Geographically, you will not be able to have a state that is geographically contiguous, because these settlements, they divide the land, you see, and so that is another practical consequence. It would really shatter the hope and the dream of ever having a Palestinian state that is geographically contiguous. And as I said, also take away the resources away from the Palestinian people.
Sorry, not really. I'm asking these questions, but about Jerusalem. Sorry, about Jerusalem. If they move the capital of Palestine a few miles away to somewhere they could call Jerusalem if they want, which is very nice for them, what will happen to Al-Aqsa being a huge Islamic, I know Jordan have custodianship of that centre, but it's not just a Palestinian holy site, it's an Islamic holy site as well.
Could you repeat the question?
I'm so sorry. I was asking about Al-Aqsa. What would happen if the Palestinian capital was moved a few miles away from Jerusalem? And Al-Aqsa is not Palestinian, it's a huge Islamic site. It's one of the second most holiest Islamic sites. So what would happen to that if it was part of Israel and the capital was moved away? I don't know if Jerusalem's not the capital of Palestine, I understand that, but it's not going to be shared either, is my impression.
Yeah, so it is true that Jerusalem is the home of the third most holiest Islamic sanctuary, Al-Aqsa Mosque. But it's also the home for important Christian sanctuaries. The Church of the Sepulchre is in Jerusalem. And in as much as Muslim Palestinians and Muslims from abroad will be denied free access to Al-Aqsa Mosque, so do Christians, from Europe, from England, would find great difficulty to go to their churches in Jerusalem. And only this week we had, the High Court in Israel allowing the sale of an important church property in Jerusalem to settlers. See? So, we have our media in the West telling us, well, the Palestinians are persecuting the Christians and driving them out. The reality is, the Israeli legal establishment is passing laws to, expropriate church property. Having said that, we have on the other hand, secular movements, who believe that Al-Aqsa Mosque is located on the site of the ancient temple of Solomon. And so they advocate the destruction of Al-Aqsa Mosque and to rebuild the ancient temple on its ruins. And this is why you see every day there are incursions into Al-Aqsa Mosque, Jewish settlers going into the mosque, performing religious rituals, under the protection of the army. Gradually, there is this fear that the conflict would assume a more religious dimension if these trends continue, that it will be an open religious conflict, no longer a political conflict between the colonizer and the colonizer, but a conflict very much akin to what you had during the time of the Crusades. You see, this is the direction that Netanyahu and his group are taking the conflict. And sadly, if they were to relocate or to create a capital for Palestine in Abu Dis and deny the Palestinians access to Jerusalem, to Al-Aqsa Mosque, this is only one step further towards, the escalation of this, or the reality of the religious conflict being ignited.
Microphone, John.
Can I ask you a question about Russia? So, if for most purposes, Russia and United States are on opposite sides and are winding each other. So, Putin is supporting Assad, he's closer to the Iranians, probably, whereas Trump is regarding them as his deadliest enemy. And yet, curiously, he seems to be almost as close to Netanyahu as Trump is. And this is somehow inconsistent. You'd almost think he'd take the side of the Palestinians just to annoy the Americans. Can you explain a bit about what Putin's up to?
Did you hear the question? So, I think we have to recall that after the demise of the Soviet Union, more than 1 million Russian Jews migrated to Palestine. Most of them were settled in the West Bank, in the occupied West Bank, including a certain Avigdor Lieberman. He lives in a settlement in the West Bank. Now, these Russian emigres, who over 1 million, whose number exceed 1 million, they still have contacts with the motherland, with Russia. And Putin, whose position is not threatened, but still relies on support from any constituency he can have it, is prepared to court, you see, that constituency in Israel, in the occupied territories. But there's another aspect to it, that these individuals, these Russians in the occupied territories, are highly skilled. Many of them who came from Russia after the demise of the Soviet Union are highly skilled scientists, entrepreneurs, etc. And so the Russian Federation can still benefit from them, even though they are, in domicile in Palestine. So that is, in my view, the reason why Putin is prepared not to antagonize the Russian immigrant community in Palestine.
Okay, can we have one last question?
Thank you. A key element of progress seems to me to be the leadership within the Palestinian community. Do you feel that there are a high caliber group of a new generation of leaders coming through within the Palestinian community? Or if not, why not? And what do we need to do to allow them to sort of flourish and come to the fore?
Well, yes and no. The appointment of Mohammed Shtier as the new Prime Minister recently, he comes from a generation below that, younger than Mahmoud Abbas. Abbas is now in his 80s and he's moving on. But I think what is important is the mindset, the attitude, the approach of the next generation. If they're going to adopt and follow blindly the policies of Abbas, then what's the point? That's why we're stuck in the rut, because they're still sticking to the policies of that generation, which we call Abbas they call them the historic generation, who fired the first bullet in the revolution of 1965. And they take pride in it, and they seek to monopolize the Palestinian political arena because of their role in the original revolution. However, they have not done as good as they should have. I take, for example, Jerusalem. The reason why we have the problem in Jerusalem is because the Oslo Accords didn't discuss it. The Oslo Accords left the question of Jerusalem untouched. And this is why the Israelis came in and entrenched themselves to the degree that today, they have the Americans saying that Jerusalem is their capital. The Palestinian Authority, the whole generation, Mahmoud Abbas and his group, they don't have a presence in Jerusalem. Their institutions are not present. No official from Ramallah can operate in Jerusalem. So it was their undoing that landed them in this situation today. I'm pleased to see young people like the current ambassador in London, Dr. Hussam Zublat, coming out and becoming an ambassador. He was in Washington, incidentally, before the Americans closed down the embassy in Washington. So, from a younger generation. But I think it is important not just the appearance, of being young, but also the substance of what policies that younger generation will articulate, whether they will adhere steadfastly to the policies of Arafat, Mahmoud Abbas, or whether they are prepared to challenge the status quo and to chart a new course.
Thank you very much. I think we have to end there. Sorry about that. Please stay and discuss as you want to. I'm sorry we can't offer you refreshments which were promised, but please do stay and have discussions with us. Now, thank you very much. Thank you for travelling here, and I hope you have a reasonable journey home. I know the taxi is going to be waiting for you. And please, everybody, do have a look at what we've been able to bring from our stall for the Zaytoun stall on, and people are waving the bucket at me. We shall have a bucket by the door, perhaps Clive will take it somewhere near the door, if you would like to contribute towards our expenses for the speaker and for